This is Dev Propulsion Labs, the podcast about building successful developer tools, hosted by Evil Martians. Hi, it's Dev Propulsion Labs, and I'm your host, Victoria Melnikova. I'm very excited to introduce today's guest. Please welcome Monica Sarbu, CEO and founder at Xata. Tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be with you today. You already said quite a bit about myself. So I think what's not said is, that I have a little daughter. She's 9 and I'm based in Berlin in Germany.
Sounds pretty great. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey to where you are today? And maybe we can start with, going a little bit back in time. Tell us about the Beats, what inspired the creation of Beats, and how did you foresee its massive success, or did you actually foresee its massive success of adoption?
At that time when I started Bits, before that, I had quite a lot of experience building monitoring tools for the telecom space. And I decided to start a new company and kind of to reuse all the knowledge that I have acquired until then. I think I was working for a few years already, 5 or 6 years or so. And so I decided to build a monitoring solution that is more general and not only for the telecom space, but it can be used differently. And at that time, the monitoring space, it was a very crowded space. So when you say as a founder, why should I start another solution when there are lots of other solutions that are very successful? So we had to have a different approach on monitoring. And what we did, basically, all the other companies, they were looking at logs and metrics. And what we did differently, well, we were looking at the network traffic. And the idea, we start with the network traffic in order to kind of have a different perspective. And then we start also collecting logs and metrics. And then at some point it became like a normal term, right? To have this observability, as it was called back then. But at the beginning, when I started, Packetbeat was not the case. So initially it was not an open source project. I decided to do it open source later because I was not a good front-end engineer. So it was very difficult to build also the backend and also the UI that's, you can easily visualize the data. So I decided to use Kibana instead, and we built some extensions on top of Kibana. Back then it was kind of a different story. Open source was not so common. When you were launching something open source, I think you had higher chances to be noticed in the market, and I think it is nowadays. But also that meant for us that it was very difficult to get investment in a company from an investor that believes in open source, and also, at least in Germany, in Berlin at that time, that also has experience with dev-tool type of company. So basically we had to bootstrap and put our money in the startup. And then we started to get a few interesting companies that were interested to acquire us. So we decided to join forces with Elastic.
Being acquired by Elastic is kind of like a dream come true for a smaller DevTool project, right? Especially when you don't have access to those, opportunities in funding, as you mentioned. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that. How did that happen? And also, I know that you took part in Elastic's going through IPO, right? As the core team. So I'd love to learn more about that as well.
Yeah, so definitely, for us, it was important to join a company and we can continue our vision. And we had this discussion with two of the founders of Elastic, and I've seen that we have a common vision. So we decided to join forces with them and kind of felt like, in a way, it was an alternative to investment. And Elastic is this type of company that they acquired a lot of companies, many companies over the years. And the advantage is that you could influence the roadmap of Elasticsearch and Kibana that we were using to build this end-to-end experience for your monitoring solution. So for us, it was just, we had much better outcome because of this. And yeah, so I stayed at Elastic for 5 or 6 years. Over the years, we also acquired other companies in order to move into other spaces. And that was very excited. I think this was one of the best decisions we took, right? I think we are functioning independent, as an independent, if you want, team inside Elastic. And yeah, we are also very lucky to be part of the IPO. We worked quite hard to reach this level of IPO, and the celebration at the network exchange was something that, yeah, not many people will unfortunately or experience this.
Yeah, I could imagine. So when the Beat was acquired by Elastic, has that acquisition changed the trajectory of Beats at all? Or how did you feel that impacted, the direction of the product?
I think we were able to move faster, quickly. We were able to hire the best people in the world because Elastic was a distributed company from day one. And at that time, in 2015, there were not so many companies that are fully distributed. And this had, I think, in my opinion, a huge impact because I've seen over the years how much you can achieve with a very small team and very high senior engineers we had in the team. So I think, I don't know what would have happened if we were just, had a company in Berlin, for example, and being able to hire people in a limited area.
Interesting. Out of curiosity, did you have to work remotely? Like, did you stay in Berlin and your team was distributed, or how did that work for you?
Yeah, so I was working distributed remote for my entire time in Elastic. Before Elastic, I was working in the office, so I kind of experienced both worlds. And for me, I wouldn't really move back to work from the office. And the main reason, there are multiple reasons. So one of them, I think the most important when you run a company that is building dev tool is to have really amazing people. And if you are not restricted to an area or to a country, you have a bigger pool of engineers that you can hire. And I think, and I've seen this was a key part of our success.
Another question, still on that topic. What happened to the open source? Did it remain open source? Or how did that transition happen as Beats was acquired by Elastic?
Yes, it remained open source, and Packetbeat was one of the first bits that we created, and then we started to create more bits, and each bit had a different function. So there were agents that you install on your server, and they collect all kinds of operational data. So we had one bit that, for example, was collecting metrics, one that was collecting logs, and so on. So in the end, we had 7 or 8 bits. And it was interesting that it was open source, but the type of customers that we had was kind of a wide variety, from smaller customers to very large organizations that were collecting with Bit so much data that, to be honest with you, I never believed that that was even possible.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds pretty magical. Let's move on to the next kind of like stage in your life. Tell us about Tupo.io. What inspired you to champion diversity in tech, leading to that formation? And can you share maybe like some memorable success story from this initiative?
So I started to go to conferences to discuss about this topic, diversity in tech. And initially I started to go to women-related conferences. And then I realized that, the audience already knows about these problems. What should I share? Problems that everyone knows. And then I realized that I think best would be to go to normal technical conferences and discuss about diversity problems. And I think this was such a huge impact on the audience that I didn't really believe myself. And I had this talk about how it is to feel like to be a woman in tech. And you go to a male dominant conference and you discuss about these topics, and people come to you and say, oh, I didn't even realize this. And definitely you change my perspective. And then I will try to do better, especially managers. I think it's important for them to be aware of all these issues. And then when the pandemic started, I wanted to do a bit more, to have more women in tech. Because before I had the chance to hear so many really bad stories about how other women in tech are dealing with day-to-day work. And so I decided to do something for the society. And I started this nonprofit organization called Tupo.io. And basically, it's a mentorship program. We extended more than women, so anyone can be a mentee, and anyone, of course, is a mentor. And yeah, I think, sometimes you have a problem at work and it's very difficult to discuss this problem with someone in the company, but it's very easy for you to discuss with someone outside. And sometimes just a very small advice can change your life, right? So there are so many statistics. They say women in tech leave tech after a few years. So that's why nowadays it's very rarely to find a woman at a senior level. And 50% leave tech. So so my goal was how can reduce this percentage and have more technical companies support women in tech, because one of the main reasons is the toxic environment in the tech companies. And many companies are not even aware of how they can improve the situation.
Do you feel like that changed over the, past like 5 to 10 years?
Yes, definitely changed. I think that more companies have this as a goal to increase the number of percentage in their company women, like diversity in general. But there are also stories that I heard that they hire women especially, and they don't really let them work on the most interesting projects. So I think it's important to also be able to support them and grow them and have leaders in the company that can be a role model for all the others. So I think for me, this is important because diverse teams can build better projects. And, diversity you can get from different things. You can get from people that have different backgrounds. And if you are a diverse company, or if you are a distributed company, you get this diversity by default. But also gender diversity is also an important one. And I've seen this change in my career, right? So for us, it's important to have diversity in Xata, and also before at Elastic in my teams, I did really huge efforts to make this possible.
Yeah, and I mean, having women like you as role models for many other women across the globe, is extremely important. Is the same for me. For example, the CEO of Evil Martians is a woman, which is a rare occurrence in our industry. And every time I encounter women like you, like Irina, I get inspired to do more, and it's important. I really like the mentorship approach because other women across the globe, they can get in touch with a mentor and really get inspired and see new horizons, which is, I think, important in increasing diversity. And I'm not speaking specifically about women. I'm just drawing an example there.
Yeah, fortunately, there are so many books out there that can teach you about this. But the problem that I find with books is that you usually have a specific problem or a custom problem, and it's very hard to find a solution for your problem in books. And that's why I think mentorship is really helping people. Unfortunately, building a nonprofit organization, I realize this. It's very difficult compared to building, for-profit or a for-profit organization. So I would have loved to have more support to be able to do something like this better.
Awesome. So from what I know, Tupo.io kind of led you to founding Xata. Is that right?
Yes, I didn't really have the thought to even start a new company, but I found there is a huge opportunity. So when we were building Tupu, we were looking for a database solution to solve all our problems. And actually, we didn't really want like rocket science type of functionality. We wanted a database, a relational database that you can store mentors and mentees and the relations between them. You know, coming from Elastic, it was very important to have a full text search functionality. So, for example, you as a mentee, you want to search for for the right mentor. So, for example, if you are in marketing, you are only interested about mentors in marketing. We also wanted to have this spreadsheet-like UI, like Airtable has. So we really like this opportunity to do manual matching between mentors and mentees and to visualize the data in a very easy way. And we also wanted to be fully managed, so we don't have to do much. Imagine that when you're running a nonprofit, especially then you want to spend less resources in building the data platform. You want to spend all our resources in building the platform that in order to help as many people as possible. And we also wanted to work with serverless applications. We couldn't find any of this solution. And looking in the database space, I think from my perspective, there were not so much innovation happening as it was, for example, in the monitoring solution space. That was very crowded and it's still very crowded. So I realized there is a huge opportunity to build the next generation of databases that is easier to use, and you don't have to be a developer that needs to understand how a database works in order to be able to use and manage one in production. But mostly I think what is important is that applications nowadays, they have higher requirements that they used to have in the past years. You really need to have multiple data stores and you have to glue them together in order to get all the functionality that you need, right? Like I mentioned, you also need not only, for example, Postgres, but also you need something like Elasticsearch for full text search. And now with AI functionality, probably you need even more functionality that you want to offer to your application. And companies basically, they need to build this data platform internally. And my thinking was like, why every company out there needs to reinvent the wheel when they can concentrate all their resources in building a product, because in the end, their users, they don't really care about the data platform and how much time and resources you spend on your data platform. They really care about the functionality that you're providing in your product. So I think this is the future we are going to, and I think it's now it's the right time to build those tools and offer that to developers.
What is the ideal customer of Xata? Who is that person?
So developers, we started with front-end developers, and now basically we are going towards back-end engineers. And that's because we offer our SDK. So initially we have our TypeScript SDK. We also have the Python SDK. There is a Go SDK built by the community. We are slowly adding more SDKs. And yeah, we currently have our own API. What I learned since I started Xata is that people like our users would like to have SQL access. So we are slowly adding this support for users.
I'm curious, you mentioned Airtable and you mentioned the spreadsheet-like interface, right? Since launching Xata in general, what kind of feedback have you received from early adopters, especially people transitioning from tools like Airtable?
I think Airtable, in my opinion, was eye-opening for many developers because you're able to build or to deal with data in a very easy and intuitive way. Airtable was not built to be used as a database, but because of this trend or serverless applications, there were not really many database options, serverless database options. So what happened is that developers were using Airtable as a serverless database because, the main problem in serverless applications is that you cannot really keep a connection to your database. And now slowly there are more other serverless databases that are starting on the market to rise. But back then was not so many options. So what we basically achieve is that you get the usability of Airtable and you put it on top of a traditional database. And what we did is we launched two main features that were innovative that no one had before. And this is something that I think was helping us kind of to attract attention from developers. So the first feature that we launched we call it workflow. So basically it's similar with Vercel deployment, a deploy preview, but for the database. So what this means is that because we support branching, so what this means is that if you have a new feature that basically requires a change in your schema, you can branch your database, you can change the schema, and you can also have the option to copy the data to the new branch. And then if everything looks good, then you can merge it in production. And it's very well integrated with platforms like GitHub, but also Vercel and Netlify. And the second feature that we launched is file attachments. And basically our goal is to have support more data types than the traditional databases. And this was one of the big steps towards that, to offer file attachment as a data type. And because, I mean, nowadays applications require storing images. For example, you have your users and, each user has an avatar, for example, or image. And for example, you're a company that needs to collect the bills from your users. You also need probably to collect the PDFs. So I think it's nowadays more and more applications require managing files, not only images, but files in general. So I think it's important to have this natively integrated into the database.
I actually want to stay on Xata for a little bit longer. So before Xata, you had experience with Beats when you were acquired by Elastic, right? Xata, is it your first experience actually fundraising for a company? Or
Yes, it's my first experience fundraising. Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about your journey? How did you manage that?
I wouldn't say it's basically the second time. With Packetbeat, there were not so many investors in Berlin at that time. And most of the investors, all of the investors were having experience with B2C type of companies. So it was more difficult. Nowadays, it's much easier because there are so many investors, even in Berlin. The experience was really good from my perspective. I had some hesitation at the beginning to start a company by myself and a female founder and single founder. But one of the founders of Elastic encouraged me that this wouldn't be the case, that I should be worried about. And actually he was right. So I didn't have any problems everything worked smoothly, the whole fundraising process.
And I also want to learn a little bit about what are the things you did in the beginning, kind of like of the Xata journey to get users. Did you invest time and resources into technical marketing, into community building? Because those are the two common kind of like avenues in developer tools. What was your strategy in the very beginning?
My thinking is that, there are two types of companies. One type is a company that build a technical product or a dev tool type of product and spend a lot of money and resources on the marketing. And there are companies that just build a good product. And we are the second type. So I feel like building a very good product is important for us because, if you build a product that you have to push users to use it, and I think is not a long-term success in my opinion. So our goal is to build something innovative. My goal is to build something that can change how databases are seen by developers, and don't spend so much money on, ads, and things like this. Of course, we are experiencing now with things like this, but not at the scale of how other companies are doing this. we are encouraging everyone from our developers to go and speak at conferences. I think, in my opinion, this is very important. I've seen this before, is that developers can build better products if they are in direct contact with the users. Why? Because they are building something, they are building a feature, and then they kind of see how the users are experiencing with using their feature. And then they will know what exactly they need to improve in order to build a better user experience and a better product.
I want to go back to the serverless applications a little bit. So right now we are, I think, at the surge of the serverless, hype. Can you share your opinion on how it's changing the landscape of database and service usage in general? What are some trends that you're seeing on the market right now?
Yeah, so definitely serverless applications are, serverless approach is more and more common, and there was a growth. The problem is that there are not enough tools out there to build, a good experience. So, for example, there were not so many serverless databases. So, it was like we experienced at Tupu was a showstopper for you, right? And now there are more and more that are starting to be in the space. I think the future will show us.
It's interesting. You build Zeta strategy around being innovative, right? In the market, you propose something new, a new kind of like showstopper solution, as you said it. And you mentioned a little bit about how you identified that gap in the tech market. Do you have any advice for other founders on how to identify those gaps? And maybe you have any advice to those people who are trying to solve, to propose novel solutions to existing problems? How do you go about that? That sounds like a big challenge.
So I didn't have experience with the database space before, but coming from a different space, from the monitoring space, where basically you are on the other side, you have a huge amount of data that you need to store, and you kind of have a different perspective. And then coming to the database space, you kind of know what are the needs of the user, and you kind of have, I think, a different view in the new space. I think it's always important. So that's why I changed a few times the space. Sometimes feels like, something is new. I have no idea about database internals, but I think it's very important that you have a fresh eye, because you have higher chances to build something or to identify a gap that others did, basically. They were in the same space, couldn't. And one of I don't want to give names, but someone that was on the board of another big database company, he said that, there were lots of database companies over the years. They were competing with their database company, and everyone wanted to, build a database that is faster, more scalable, and you have a different approach. You want to make it more easier to use, and to make the life of developers easier, and to be able to offer all this functionality that, for example, Postgres nowadays is the most common used database. And what we are building is that we are building all these features on top of Postgres in order to make your life easier.
Yeah. Sounds pretty exciting, because, bringing on that amazing developer experience and ultimately increasing developers' productivity is kind of like the role of developer tool space. We want to equip developers with better tools, with better experience, because they do spend, their whole days looking at the monitor, kind of like engaging with the tools. So I really like that approach that you have. So my final question would be, what's next for Monica Sarbu? With, so many achievements under your belt, what are some initiatives that you're looking forward to in the coming years?
So currently I'm concentrating on Xata, and I'm very excited about this opportunity and about building something that is innovative, building something that can help companies build better applications. I'm also very excited to be an angel investor, and kind of the main reason why I decided to be an angel investor is my experience with rising around. And initially I wanted to rise around from angel investors. And my main goal was to have a diversity in our cap table. It was very difficult to achieve. So now my goal is to help other companies have a diversity in their cap table. And I think this is something that I want to do.
Sounds pretty exciting. I tend to end my episodes with a warm fuzzy. That's what I call it, the last section. And in the section, I ask you to share something that makes you feel great about what you're doing at the moment. What makes you feel great about your current situation?
I always was fortunate to work on products that I really like and I really love. I think this is key, in my opinion, for building something that, you wake up in the morning and you are energized that this is something that I want to do. And for me, at the beginning of my career, when I was writing code, my goal was always building something, and over the years this kind of shifted, right? So because at some point I had to concentrate fully on managing teams, and sometimes I was writing documentation and kind of filling the gaps of the team, what the team didn't have time to do. So for me, it was always about building something that that can change the life of developers. And this is something that I'm still doing it.
Sounds like a big, exciting mission.
I know you're in but that's
Yeah. And last and not least, I want to provide space for you to give, a call to action to our listeners. What do you want them to do? Do you want them to check Xata? What is it that you want them to do?
Yeah, definitely. I would love to encourage everyone to have a look at Xata.io, and please let us know what features you are more excited about, and let us know what features are missing from the product. And we'd love to hear about your feedback.
Sounds pretty great. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to have you today. And I think this is an exciting time for us to do what we're doing.
Yeah, it was lovely to chat with you.
Thank you for catching yet another episode of Dev Propulsion Labs. We at Evil Martians transform growth stage startups into unicorns, build developer tools, and create open source products. If your developer tool needs help with product design, development, or SRE, visit evilmartians.com/devtools. See you in the next.